This week on Cinemaholic, special guest Abby Olcese joins us as we cast our ballots for Longshot, a brand new political romantic comedy starring Charlize Theron and Seth Rogen.
I was questioning, do I just not like romantic comedies? Because I feel like they're not doing for me what they should.
But that's not all. School is out, but the party is just getting started. We're doing an early review for the upcoming bad teen comedy, Booksmart, the first film directed by Olivia Wilde. This does feel like one of those comedies where I think in a few years, people are going to rewatch this film and be like, oh my gosh, Molly Gordon was in Booksmart. And later in the show, we discuss 3 new releases on Netflix. All that and more is coming up on Cinemaholics. Welcome once again to Cinemaholics. I am the author of the novel Killer Joy, a book about Pixar called The Pixar Theory, and I write about film. For Adam Tickets, The Young Folks, and Cinemaholics, I am John Negroni. Will Ashton is out this week, but we have a special guest filling in. She's a film critic based in Kansas City. She has bylines for Birth, Movies, Death, /film.com, Film School Rejects, Relevant, and plenty more. Welcome back to Cinemaholics, Abby Olcese.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So great to have you back. Technically, you were on the show for our Tully episode, which was it was in the 60s, so it was a year ago. And that was an awesome conversation. Great to have you back on. But you were also technically on the show for our top movies of 2018. The listeners could hear your recorded voicemail. So thank you for partaking in that.
Yeah, absolutely. That was super fun to be part of.
Yeah, I think that one was my favorite because we shared the same favorite movie of 2018, which was 8th Grade, if I have that correct.
Yes, absolutely.
Yes. Great to have you back on and in earnest, and appreciate you filling in for Will Ashton. Both he and I were out of town this past week, and so our schedules did not align, and so things worked out to have you on. We're going to be talking about a whole lot of great films. We have some off topics to get to, but as always, you can find more episodes of Cinemaholics on adamtickets.com. Our full archive is on cinemaholics.com. along with our reviews and bonus episodes, everything you want from the world of Cinemaholics. If you want to send some feedback to the show, our email is cinemaholicspodcast@gmail.com. And if you want to become a patron of our show and support us financially, if you have the means, please go to patreon.com/cinemaholics. And of course, links to everything I just said are in the show notes. Okay, Abby Olcese, we have this special thing called Extra Milestone. I don't know if you've seen my tweets about it. I understand things get busy, and I understand if you haven't listened to an episode yet, but could I convince you to check out an anniversary episode where Sam Nolan, Will Ashton, and myself talk about 7 Samurai, Some Like It Hot, and It Happened One Night?
Yeah, absolutely. Those are all fantastic movies, and I would love to hear you talk about them.
Oh, wow. So it sounds like we're doing an ad, but that's not intentional. So if you've never heard of Extra Milestone, it is our special bonus podcast that we do once a month. We celebrate a film anniversary. This most recent episode for April just came out this past week. These episodes come out earlier, though, if you are a patron. And yes, we talked about 7 Samurai because it came out 65 years ago in April. So that's a super fun episode. I know, right? It feels like it's only been 55, maybe. But we also have another bonus episode coming out later this week. You might be thinking to yourself, John, Will, special guest Abby Olcese, I almost said your name wrong. Where's your review of Under the Silver Lake? I don't see it in the show notes. I've been waiting to hear about Under the Silver Lake for years because that's how long it feels like they've been delaying this one. We actually have a bonus episode coming out later this week for that film, which stars Andrew Garfield. And I don't know, Abby, if this film's even on your radar, or do you know anybody who's seen it already and has some opinions on it you found interesting?
I have exactly one friend who's seen it, your friend and mine, Brock Wilbur. And he, I believe, likes it in kind of an odd, offbeat, strange way. But I've also read a lot of reviews kind of on both sides of the coin. I've been fascinated by the story of this movie for a while, since it was supposed to come out a long time ago. And I'm a big fan of David Robert Mitchell, and I'm very eager to hear what he does next. It kind of sounds like reports of this are that it kind of maybe A24 didn't quite know what to do with it, which seems odd since they're such a auteur-focused studio, but that it was kind of unfairly dumped. But either way, I'm very curious to kind of see what all the fuss is about and just kind of find out why it was so hard to sell to people.
I couldn't agree more. It is so strange that from the people who brought us, The Lovers, a film that I have no idea who I would have marketed that to, they found a
Mm-hmm.
way. But yeah, very strange that they delayed it so long. I've heard unbelievable things about it. It's on video on demand at the moment. So I definitely recommend, if you are jazzed about checking out that episode. Will recorded it already with Corey Woodruff. I have not listened to it yet because they do have spoilers. So I'm going to watch the film and then I'm going to listen to it, and we're going to release it later this week. So you may want to rent that $5 on iTunes and probably on a few other services. You might be able to check it out. I have no idea if this will show up in any red boxes, but if they do, please email us and let us know, because that would be fascinating.
I was just going to say it's like one red box in like a strange corner of LA that like nobody goes to.
Yes, that would be yes, a red box that is in Hollywood itself or in some sort of alleyway, maybe. I don't know, some sort of special grocery store. Who knows? But yeah, that's Under the Silver Lake. Keep your eyes out for that bonus pod. Also, there are a few movies that Abby and I did not see that came out this week, simply because of time reasons. And so I understand a lot of you are looking at it. I don't see The Intruder. I don't see Ugly Dolls. Where is Sam Nolan? He wrote the Cinemaholics review for Ugly Dolls, gave it a C-, right? Well, yes, and you can go check that out. Unfortunately, nobody else braved Ugly Dolls. So you'll have to read Sam's review. He did not favor that film from STX, I think their first animated film, very strange. And The Intruder, which, so this is the one with Michael Ealy, right? Megan Good, Dennis Quaid is like a very villainous homeowner. I wanted to see this one. I did not have the time. Abby, are you just skipping this one entirely, or what are you hearing?
I think it's probably going to be a renter for me eventually. I haven't heard much about it, but I am curious. I think it... The casting is not something you would usually see for a movie like this, which I think makes it interesting and worth checking out. I haven't read a ton one way or the other, but it's something that I'm curious about, and I'll probably get to eventually.
Yeah, the reviews aren't amazing, but I know people are kind of enjoying it in a very schlocky way. So I am interested. It takes place in my neck of the woods, which is like the theme of 2019 so far. A lot of movies are happening in the Bay Area, and I'm all for it. I'm all for Dennis Quaid playing a villain too, because he is such a dexterous actor, and you wouldn't really get that notion from some of the more recent films he's done. And this one just looks bonkers to me. I would definitely want to see it. It's from Deon Taylor. I think the last movie I saw from him was either Meet the Blacks or Traffic. So very interesting new film from Sony. The Avengers Endgame competition, I guess. So, the studios are really tossing up some interesting things to try to eat some of Endgame's lunch. But that film, of course, is absolutely blasting the box office. We are going to kind of bring that up in a second. We're going to go through some of the comments from last week before diving into our reviews. But Abby, I have an icebreaker question for you. The listeners have come to expect this whenever we have somebody on. We haven't gotten this yet, but I would expect we would get hate mail if I did not ask you at least one question. The usual is, what is your Hogwarts house? I don't know if you have that prepared, but I have a bonus question to ask you, especially if the Hogwarts one does not suit your fancy. So, but do you know what it is?
My Hogwarts house? I believe I am a Ravenclaw. Some people have told me that I have Gryffindor qualities. I think I could be a Ravendor. But I lean towards the scholarly side of things, so I think that would be a good fit.
Yeah, I dig Ravendor. I think that sounds pretty right. I like that. One of my favorite things about a film we'll talk about pretty soon, Booksmart, involves some great Hogwarts sorting house formulas and some theories, interesting theories going on in Olivia Wilde's movie about what you could be half this, half that. I don't know if I buy it. We'll talk about it soon. But I do have a bonus question, because I know you are a fellow fan of Game of Thrones, and we have gotten some feedback because we have not talked about Game of Thrones yet. The most recent season, which I understand. The big reason is because Will does not watch Game of Thrones. I do. And we're thinking of maybe doing something for the finale. But Abby, you are here. You watch the show. I just want to know, what do you think of season 8 so far? Are you digging it? Are you having some issues with it? Is it a mix? What's going
on? It's a bit of a mix. I'm enjoying a lot of the individual character work, by and large. So the second episode, like the one pre-battle, I thought
Yeah.
was fantastic.
And of course, we are being very vague on purpose because we do not want to spoil anything for people who may be catching up. You're doing great at it.
Yeah, thank you. But yeah, there were a lot of great moments in that. I have a friend who is kind of obsessed with the idea of watching characters that we're really familiar with in like action-based ways doing really normal non-action-based things, and that was an episode that I thought was full of stuff like that. So like Davos serving soup, that's a great moment. I think the third episode I also liked for the reasons that a lot of other people have liked it.
Sure.
I was right there with everybody. I do think, though, I think I saw on Twitter that somebody had a pretty astute comment that it seems like a lot of the characters that we've come to trust as leaders, whereas in previous seasons they might have been like strong in some areas but flawed in others. Mm-hmm. Now it just seems like they're kind of basically incompetent at the one thing that they should know.
Right.
And I agree. I think that's kind of becoming a problem for a lot of the larger characters. But it's also giving some of the smaller characters a chance to really kind of develop and come forward in a way that I think is interesting. So
I think we're pretty close to the same opinion, because I have also been mixed, but enthusiastically mixed. I think that it's hard to complain about a show this theatrical that we get in such amazing fashion. And I think that in hindsight, some of these weird looking missteps are going to register fine, because as usual, this kind of feels like the Benioff and Weiss playbook of like their setup and payoff structure is very obtuse. It doesn't really match George R.R. Martin's writing, and it can't, because it's no longer an adaptation. It's now a full on, some people would call it fan fiction or brand fiction and play jokes on that, but it really is their thing at this point, until the books say otherwise. So at the moment, I'm just sort of letting it drag and ride, I suppose. Okay, bonus question, and then we'll leave it at that. Favorite season and least favorite season. For me, least favorite, easy, season 5. It's atrocious. Favorite season is season 4. What about you?
Okay, interesting. Least favorite would probably also be season 5. I think 5 and 6 tend to move really slowly for me. But favorite season is, I think, season 3, hands down. Has some of my favorite moments in it. Season 4 was pretty good too. But I'm a big fan of the Jamie Brienne relationship, and it had some fantastic moments in season 3, as well as I think maybe my favorite ending to an episode that's been in the entire season. Is it? Can I spoil that one? I feel like people have made it that far.
Yes. Fast forward a minute. So if you do not want to get spoiled on a season 3 spoiler for Game of Thrones.
So the episode where Jamie loses his hand, and like the way that it cuts at the very end is just like peak. Like, this is what I watched the show for. Like, that crazy thing happens.
Yeah.
And then it's just over.
Absolutely. And season 3 is my second favorite. So I totally agree with you on those points, because what happens in season 3, of course, we won't give it away, is just one of the peak moments in television. It's one of those things that you look back on it and you're like, yes, this had to happen. It was inevitable. But in the moment, it was so heartbreaking. And so, yes, wonderful season. I love season 4, though. I love the fallout of season 3 and how they handle it. The third book is the best book, in my opinion. And I just think it's such a wonderfully woven chapter in Martin's ongoing story, in the way that you do have this massive event that they play out in season 3. But I just love the way that it peters out. And that final episode in season 4 is one of my all-time favorites. But enough Game of Thrones for now. We could talk Game of Thrones all podcasts. We will not. Hope a lot of you are enjoying the final season as well, those of you who are watching. Before we move on to our featured review for this week, we just have a couple of comments we want to get to. Remember, if you want to hear your comment aloud on the show, just send a comment or leave a comment, on cinemaholics.com for all of our Cinemaholics episodes. We want to know what you think of the movies we're talking about. It's not all about us. So last week we talked about Avengers Endgame. It was a great podcast. We had a lot of fun talking the movie with Alicia Grauso and Matt Donato, who came on. We did all the spoilers. It was a lot of fun. We will not give away spoilers right now. We could, because there were some comments that had spoilers in them, so you definitely want to avoid those if you have not seen the movie yet. One we wanted to bring out was from James. James said, I would grade the first hour of Avengers Endgame an A, the second hour a B, and the third hour a B+. Abigail Chessie, I believe you saw Avengers Endgame as well. What do you think of those ratings? Do you think James has a solid footing there?
I do actually. I think that's pretty solid. I like the beginning of Endgame a lot. I think it's got some solid emotional moments at the end. I feel like on the whole, the plot that they chose to go with, well, I think it was a good one. Like they chose to do it in a way that gave people a lot of outs. It was like the easiest way that you could have done that with the lowest possible stakes.
Ooh, that's interesting.
And that disappointed me a little bit. I think it did pay off pretty well in the end, but it ended well. So
yeah,
that's how I feel about that.
All right. I can definitely respect that opinion. I would only have a couple of things, but we could definitely don't want to stretch this conversation out. Yeah, everyone heard what I had to say about the film last week. Last we have from Mad Honey, I think that's supposed to be a play on Mad Money, said, I agree with Alicia on the way the film handled Thor. Did not work for me at all. I couldn't help but feel like his arc from Ragnarok has been dropped entirely or mishandled by the Russos. The Russos, of course, being the directors of the film. I don't fully agree with this. I do agree with Alicia. There were a lot of missteps, I think, with that character. But I know this has been a divisive thing with how they handle Thor in a lot of ways, mainly the way he gets depressed and what some people would definitely call body shaming. I think it's actually a very complex discussion to be had, and it's been fascinating to read some of the think pieces. But Abby, did you have a take on that, or do you have something maybe to recommend that somebody wrote about? I'm forgetting some of the really good ones that I checked out, but they're all over the place.
Yeah. Let's see. Yeah, I enjoyed Thor's arc. I agree that it gets a bit body shamey at times. I would have liked to have seen a little more development of what kind of leader he's become after Ragnarok. Sure. And I also am not super happy with the way that he ends things with Valkyrie. I think that's written in what's meant to be a more empowering moment for her, but it feels very much the opposite, I think. I found that a little problematic, but apart from that, I think it was okay.
Sounds good. Yeah, I can definitely see that side of it. It's something that I've been considering more since a few people have brought that up. So I think that is a perspective people are throwing onto the movie. If you agree, disagree, you can definitely check out the episode from last week and leave some follow-up comments. We'd love to read them. But without any further ado, Abby, let's talk about our first film of the week. I believe this is the widest release, I want to say, for this weekend. It's coming out. Oh, no, sorry. Ugly Dolls had the widest release, which, of course, we're not talking about it. That came out in over 3,600 theaters. Longshot came out in 3,200. And so eating up some of those Avengers Endgame screens, I suppose. But yes, Longshot is a romantic comedy, but with a lot of political undertones. This is coming to us from the director of 50/50, Jonathan Levine. It's written by Dan Sterling and Liz Hanna. And the whole film is about a woman who is the Secretary of State. She works for a kind of TV star president who doesn't really take the job seriously. Wow, what does that sound like? And she hires a journalist played by Seth Rogen. Oh, and I forgot to mention, of course, the Secretary of State is played by Charlize Theron, the wonderful Charlize Theron. And she wants to run for president and get the endorsement from the current president, who's played by Bob Odenkirk in a role that, when he first appears, I don't know if you'll agree with this, very much felt to me like Michael Scott, like the way he was playing Michael Scott from The Office in one of those later episodes. Was that just me, or I don't even know if you are a fan of The Office?
I am. Actually, I could see that. That tracks for me. Yeah.
It doesn't hold up because there are later scenes where you're like, that's not really Michael Scott, so my headcanon doesn't work anymore. But yes, I definitely got the feeling like when they were writing it, they were definitely like being like, all right, how would Steve Carell do this? But regardless, Bob Odenkirk does a pretty good job in my opinion. So the Secretary of State, Charlotte Field, she hires a kind of firebrand journalist who works out of this kind of like justice-y, like anti-establishment newspaper. And Seth Rogen's character, I forget his name in the film, but Fred, actually. Yeah. He goes with her on a tour around the world, and she actually used to be his babysitter. So he's always had this really deep crush on her. And over the course of this tour, he maybe starts to feel, oh, maybe there's something here. Maybe there's something romantic between us. The problem, of course, is that not only is it a long shot for Charlotte Field to win the presidency because she is a woman and because of all the difficult things that women have to face when running for public office, because all the challenges that they have to face that men usually don't. With all of that, it's also a long shot for someone like her to work with someone like Fred, who is a little bit more schlubby, very cute man, very funny, and definitely as somebody, you could definitely see the chemistry between them, I suppose. And I think that is one thing about this film that I actually adore, is the chemistry at play. And you do kind of wonder yourself, wow, these two people, I do buy that they would be in a close relationship, and it develops in a way that you don't always see from romantic comedies. So let's talk about it. The cast also includes O'Shea Jackson Jr. as one of Fred's best friends, Andy Serkis in a role that I did not know was him until after the movie and the credits rolled, June Diane Raphael, which is so great to see her again, Bob Odenkirk, as I mentioned, and Alexander Skarsgård, who I thought had the least to do in this one. I felt a little let down by that character arc personally. But Abby, generally speaking, Did you enjoy Long Shots? Did it win your heart?
It really did. I'm kind of ride or die for Long Shot. I liked it a lot. I liked it very much. I am one of those people who thinks that the romantic comedy has been kind of going through a long overdue renaissance in the last year plus. Like it's almost been getting to the point where I was questioning, like, do I just not like romantic comedies? Because I feel like they're not doing for me what they should. And this was the first that I'd seen in a long time where it made me think, this is what I want when I watch a romantic comedy. This is charming. It understands its audience. It is showing a relationship that is genuinely supportive. And it's actually funny. The characters are really well developed. So yeah, I really love it.
I could agree more with the kind of what you're implying there, is that they're likable characters. You never get the feeling that Charlotte Field, like Charlize Theron, you can tell a woman co-wrote this because her character is written in a very human way. She's fun. She respects her job. She takes her job seriously, but she's a human being. She has a lot of layers to her. And part of the fun of the movie is we're sort of following Seth Rogen along as he gets to know her more as her speechwriter, because he has to ask her personal questions. And even though they know each other from childhood, there is this kind of nice, like, getting to know you again element to this romantic comedy, which I really appreciated it, because I don't know. I can't think of a lot of romantic comedies that do that sort of thing in any sort of believable way. I think of films like No Strings Attached, which kind of does it in the clunky way of like almost a montage of different moments in their life when they sort of reconnect, but you never really get the feeling that they knew each other at some point. Whereas I think this film does a better job at that. And I know I'm citing a film from like 9 years ago to make my point. Regardless, yes, the very likable characters, they have flaws to them. I think that the Seth Rogen character could have easily been played for just being abrasive and overly aggressive and not supportive to what you were saying. But he's a mix of things. He's definitely a little excitable, which is relatable in a lot of ways. Like in his situation, a lot of us could see ourselves reacting in the same way as him, kind of awkwardly, not knowing what to do, but also having your heart in the right place, which is a nice message. So it sounds like the film worked for both of us, but was there anything that kind of like weirded you out, or did you watch the film more than once actually?
I haven't. I've only watched it the once, but I do hope to see it again. I'm trying to think if there was anything about it that I didn't love immediately. I think it's possible that they could have developed O'Shea Jackson Jr.'s character a little bit. I do like what we get to see of him. I think I like him so much that I would like to see more of him. I think the same probably goes for June Diane Raphael's character, which is, I mean, they're kind of stock best friend characters in romantic comedies, but I feel like the movie does such a good job with what you see of them that I want more. And I agree with you that I think Alexander Skarsgård's character kind of shows up and plays a role and then just sort of disappears. And that I think that could have been developed a little bit further too. But yeah, I think I'm sort of in like the honeymoon phase with this, where it's just I just enjoyed it so much.
The flaws don't matter.
Like,
it's fine.
Yeah, the flaws don't matter. It's fine.
You can nitpick it. I did find myself nitpicking some of the arcs and being like, oh, they didn't really finish this arc in any sort of real way. But I guess I was okay with it. Like, I didn't really knock the film that much for it because it's so long that I was ready for it to end in a good way.
That's true. And I think over 2 hours. You could probably complain a little bit about the length, but honestly, that didn't bother me much either. I think what the movie does, it creates characters that you want to spend time with. I think the thing that makes those getting to know you bits so effective is that it introduces both Charlotte and Fred as characters that are innately fun to be around and interesting to be around. And so like you want to watch them get to know each other because they're they're interesting. You want to know more about them.
Yeah, and I was surprised because, I don't know, some films have tried to be political over the last few years, and I think a lot of them have struggled to maintain that balance of like, okay, we get it. Veep is now like very close to reality. It's like politics is very heightened at the moment. And so when a film kind of dives into this territory, it can be so tricky because for a lot of people, what's going on in the world is very depressing and it's very divisive. It's very polarized. We get knocked all the time if we bring anything up because people don't want to hear it. They don't want to deal with this, all the bad news going on right now. They don't want to deal with, being hated for who they voted for, all of these things. And so I went into Longshot a little skeptical because I was like, oh, how are they going to? But then I remembered this is Jonathan Levine, who, as I mentioned before in 50/50 has such serious subject matter with cancer. And I thought that film was wonderful in the way that you never felt like he was using cancer as a commodity, as a punchline. He was always treating it with a decent amount of respect, of you understanding what the characters who are dealing with it are actually going through. And with Longshot, not to say that that has much going on in the way of politics, it sort of rests on an environmental issue, which is pretty bipartisan for a lot of people, I would say. So you can kind of move away from like Republican Democrat things, and you can just sort of be like, all right, what does it mean to be have a political integrity? And I like that the film straddles that line. It doesn't alienate any specific issues, because it does at one point in regards to a couple of the characters, as you sort of mentioned. We won't give that away. And it doesn't go all the way with it, I thought. Maybe a rewatch would change my mind. But what about you? How do you think this film handled its political undertones?
It's good that you bring that up, actually, because that is something that I think there's not as much in that movie as there could have been. I do think that the particular conflict that it brings up with one character, that is, it's a pretty interesting thing when it does pop up. I think I would like to see a little more dialogue around that. And additionally, I think it's interesting to me that the movie doesn't reveal much of Charlotte's own politics, like where they lie. I don't even think we know what party she's running with. But the fact that she's seeking the endorsement of Bob Odenkirk's president character, who she seems to be kind of diametrically opposed to, in a kind of political logic sense, doesn't quite work for me the way that I feel like the movie wants it to. Like from a script logic standpoint, I think it makes sense. But if you are somebody who is running on a platform with a certain amount of idealism, and the person that you are hoping will endorse you doesn't back you up, I feel like that doesn't look great to supporters, and that's a pretty easy thing to figure out. I don't really know if there's a way around that where you can kind of take that and make it palatable to a mainstream audience like that.
Kind of made me wonder if he was actually, not to interrupt, but it actually made me wonder if they were sort of implying he's like an independent. He's kind of like nonpartisan. So you don't, it's doing the Parks and Recreation thing almost.
Right.
It's like, don't call the parties out. Yeah. Let people fill in the gaps. And it's more about you as a person and how you deal with politics as a human being, not as a party. Cause that has so many hangups. It has so much intertextuality that a screenplay just can't possibly control unless that's what the film is supposed to be about. Yeah, no, I agree with that. And that was something that I really appreciated about Parks and Rec too, was how it made politics more about the importance of civic engagement and the importance of caring about things and trying to do good stuff than anything else. And I think this movie tries to do that too. I don't know that it the setting, I think, makes it harder to pull that off. And I think some of those seams show a little bit. But for the most part, I think the messages that it's trying to get across, it does successfully. All right. I definitely agree with that. I think that it is one of those films that, like you were saying before, it's about the romance, really. And it's about these characters. It's about them getting to know each other and dealing with heightened situations. And there's specifically a scene involving Molly that is probably my favorite whole thing that the film does. It's so wonderful and engaging. And it's the one thing that I don't think will ever escape my mind, is like that entire stretched out scene is just some of the best comedy I've seen this year. We're talking about two amazing comedies actually this week, which I'm happy about. But winding it down, I definitely wanted this one to be a little bit more successful at the box office. It's not doing well. I think I know a lot of people are blaming Avengers Endgame, but it is hard because this is sort of a mid-sized budget film based on an original idea, and it has high-profile actors. What's going on here? Why are people not watching this? It's only made 13 million at the box office, which is such a low debut for this. It cost 40 million to make. It needs to do better. What's your theory? Is it the marketing, or do you think people just don't want to go see a political romantic comedy?
I think maybe the marketing. It's I've seen a couple of reviews that were a little bit disappointingly shallow in terms of like Seth Rogen is now a romantic lead. We just have to accept it. I think maybe some people are getting a little bit tired of sort of the schlubby boyfriend storyline that pops up in a lot of romantic comedies. Maybe
Sure.
that's something that's kind of getting worn out. But I hope that people give it a shot because I think the movie does something really different and interesting with that formula. And it's maybe Avengers Endgame is to blame a little bit. I know people are still like super psyched about it. But yeah, I've been playing this up to as many people as I can. Like, it's a great date night movie. It is an excellent choice if you're wanting to go out and see something super pleasant with a person you care about. And I don't know that a lot of people had that at the top of their mind. At least the friends that I have talked to about it didn't seem to quite register for them until I told them. So it may just be that it's maybe the genre has gotten to a point where it just doesn't really float anymore. But I hope people give it a shot.
Yeah.
A long shot.
Oh, there it is. Okay.
Ah.
Yeah. I was like, oh, am I going to have to edit that in? Anyway. Yeah. So critics definitely really like this one. 83% on Rotten Tomatoes. That is great. A lot of critics were high on this, and you don't always see that for romantic comedies, which is pretty exciting, especially ones that are a bigger budget like this, like a studio romantic comedy. But what I'm seeing is, I mean, its CinemaScore was a B, and that sort of gives the impression to me that the word of mouth probably isn't helping this. We'll see what happens next weekend, but I just wonder if people are being turned off by the length of it. Maybe they wanted something a little bit more traditional. I think critics are really liking it because it is a bit more inventive with its romantic comedy. Like, there are certain things that happen where you're like, oh, this is happening already? That's, interesting. Which I appreciated because we see so many romantic comedies. It's just nice to see something different and innovative. But of course, that can cause some people to maybe not appreciate it as much and not get what they thought they were going to get. So I agree. People should give it a long shot. I don't think it's a long shot to say that this is a film you'll probably enjoy. My final grade was actually a solid B. I think it's really solid. I got close to B+. I think the character arcs not always hitting their marks is what hurt me ultimately on giving it a B+. But what about you, Abby? What's your final grade for this one?
I think I would give it an A- for those same reasons. I know I've said already that I'm super ride or die for this. I love it a lot. Maybe it's definitely got flaws. I mean, not every movie is perfect, but it's pretty close to exactly what I want from a romantic comedy.
All right, so A- for Abby Olchesi, and based on what the critics are saying, I think that is a very good position. All right, let's move on to our next film. We both saw this as well, and this is another comedy, not a romantic comedy, but more of a teenage comedy. And the director, Olivia Wilde, she's very specifically said, I got to see this at the San Francisco Film Festival, and she specifically was like, we wanted this to be a generational anthem. And that film is Booksmart. When you watch it, you will absolutely be like, oh, I get what she's saying. This is like Dazed and Confused meets Superbad meets a lot of other films from the 80s, 90s, and 2000s that is based around teenagers going to parties, coming of age, and ultimately is about friendship. And like I said, Olivia Wilde directed it. The screenplay comes from Emily Halpern and Sarah Haskins, Susanna Fogel, and Katie Silberman. The cast includes Caitlin Dever and Beanie Feldstein as these best friends who they're book smart, right? They did what they were supposed to do in school. They didn't go to parties. They got straight A's. They got into amazing colleges. But the problem is it's the last day of school, and they just found out that everybody in their class is also going to awesome colleges. And so they're wondering, did we make a mistake? Did we give up fun in high school for something that we didn't have? Do we needlessly give up having fun in high school? So they try to cram all of the partying into one final night before graduation. Will Ferrell and Adam McKay are executive producers on this, which I have to admit made me a little wary, because I was like, okay, what to what extent did they have creative control over this film? And after watching it, I'd say probably 0 to none. I definitely didn't get that sort of vibe. This is a very different kind of comedy because Olivia Wilde, this is her first film. She's, of course, a wonderful actress, and I love her directing style. I think it's a little shabby around the edges. I think that she might have not had some calls with editing that might have made this a little bit tighter, but I think for a first-time director, this is incredible stuff. I'm ride or die for Booksmart. I've seen the film twice now, and I haven't laughed this hard in a movie in so long. The first time I saw it, I was basically collapsing in my chair from laughing at this movie. Second time I saw it, I didn't collapse. I didn't fall out of my chair this time, but mainly because I was with my girlfriend and I didn't want to embarrass myself, but I came close. And I think it got me even more the second time on an emotional level. But Abby Olchesi, what about you? Was Booksmart, was it in the A territory for you, or are you signing this report card an incomplete or worse?
Oh, it's an A. It's absolutely an A.
Thank goodness.
Yeah, I identify very strongly with this movie. Molly and Amy, Beanie Feldstein and Caitlin Deaver's characters are a very close approximation of what I was like in high school.
Wait, Abby, I'm sorry, but
yeah,
we've got to say, you didn't just give it an A. Did you give it a triple A?
Oh,
there it is. Yes.
Clever.
Only makes sense if you've seen the film.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Good in joke. Yeah, I'm jealous you've gotten to see it twice because I can't wait to see it again. I identify very closely with Molly and Amy, as well as just the things they talk about, the experiences that they have, that desire to be more popular with their classmates, and like I really love I love high school movies, especially that are just kind of like one long party, like one long odyssey. Night. So. Yeah, like Superbad is like that. Dazed and Confused is like that. I'm trying to think. 16 Candles, like one of the classics of the genre, is like that. And it's a really fun way to navigate all of the different kinds of characters and person types that you find in high school. And I think the movie does that really well, and kind of mixes it along with the sort of bittersweetness of growing up and changing and wanting to get in like the last few things before you leave and become a completely different person. And what else? I think that may be most of it, but I think it hits that kind of hilarious and sweet mark and sad mark just right at the most effective point.
I couldn't agree more. And I think one of the things that really rounds this out is the cast, because on paper, I look at this cast and I look at the way these characters are written, and I think that is kind of thin. But then you realize that is kind of the point, is that these characters seem thin at first glance. And a lot of the fun of the film is learning alongside these two girls that maybe they were being a little judgmental and maybe they were sort of taking their classmates for granted. And I loved that message. It's such a positive message. It's one that does carry that genuine, authentic feel of high school, because that really is what high school is like. It isn't the, Breakfast Club niche kind of cliquey sort of thing that was present in the 80s in John Hughes movies. It's different now. That high school is just very different. And I appreciate that someone like Olivia Wilde is coming in to do a film about this subject, because it is so relevant to what I personally perceive. Like my niece is in high school, and I definitely do my best to relate with the kids, but it's not easy. They're going through some stuff, and Abby, I do appreciate that we both apparently gravitate toward these films. Like 8th Grade last year was about a sort of similar subject matter in a broad sense, not as specific as this, and definitely more of like the characters in 8th grade who are older, right? That's more the story we're following. But as I mentioned, yes, the cast. The cast is where this really shines for me. I thought Billy Lord as Gigi, this sort of eccentric character, was such a delight, such a great way to break up the action. I was not aware of Skylar Gisondo, who plays Jared in this, who I didn't know what to make of him the first time. By the time I watched this the second time, I was all in with this character. I think that he's brilliant, and it's such a fun comic relief. Jessica Williams, loved seeing her. I feel like I haven't seen her since her Netflix original that she did last year. And Jason Sudeikis, who pops up in this, absolutely wonderful. Again, kind of a thinly written character. Same sort of goes for Lisa Kudrow and Will Forte, who play Amy's parents. they get some of the best laughs, but they're not really in the movie much, which I did appreciate it. What about you? Do you feel like these characters had the right amount of time each?
I think they did. I think they did in the sense that the way that we see them and what we find out about them is probably pretty close to the way that Molly and Amy understand them. Maybe with the exception of Amy's parents, Will Forte and Lisa Kudrow, since I know that one of the running jokes in the movie is how strongly Amy feels about her parents and how much she loves them. But I think it makes sense. Like from an outsider perspective, this is probably how you would relate to like Jessica Williams, like the cool teacher in your class, or your principal, or like Billy Lord's insane, like ubiquitous demon character who just kind of shows up at every single party they go to. She is amazing, by the way. I hope that this is like the breakout role that she so richly deserves, because
Absolutely.
Holy cow, she has got so much energy in this. Like she is really committed, and it's something that could very easily be like obnoxiously over the top, and it never gets there. Like she is exactly as crazy as this role requires her to be.
Yeah, there are a lot of newcomers in this, and you kind of get the sense, like Molly Gordon, for example, plays Annabelle, who's nicknamed AAA, and Mason Gooding, Victoria Rezga, and Austin Crute, and a few others. They're all relative newcomers who I was just honestly not aware of. I don't think that they've been in a lot of things yet. And this does feel like one of those comedies where I think in a few years people are going to rewatch this film and be like, "Oh my gosh, Molly Gordon was in Booksmart. Really?
Oh yeah.
Oh wow."
Yeah.
Cuz she's already in another film coming out in August called Good Boys. Does not look as good as this.
Oh,
but that's
actually,
another
I
sort
have
of
seen
super
Good
bad.
Boys. Yeah,
You saw it.
I got to see Good Boys at South by Southwest, and it's actually really sweet, and she's quite good in it. So yeah,
Really?
I think we're going to be seeing a lot more from her.
I think when we did our summer movie preview, Good Boys was one of my dark horses of a film that I think kind of looks terrible, but I'm hoping it's really good. So for those who don't know, it's basically Superbad, but for tweens. So they're like 11 or 12. And I want it to be really funny. So is it funny on top of being sweet?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I think it's really funny. And I think it is, I enjoy that it is a movie that's trying to be about, young boys learning how to be good boys and how to be good men, on top of just all of the crazy antics. So like much like Booksmart, I think it's a nice balance of like genuine emotion and like just really funny comedy.
All right. I appreciate that tangential early review for Good Boys. We'll talk more about Good Boys in a few months. Very, very excited to hear that it's better than I anticipated. That's always good to hear. But yeah, like I said, lots of newcomers. I think that Nick, Ryan, Theo, these all seem like people who will show up later on. And I mean, we got to give it up to Caitlin Dever and Beanie Feldstein, who they've been around. They've done films. I think the last I saw Caitlin Dever was Detroit, and Feldstein, I think Lady Bird, of course. But, you know, ever since I think Neighbors 2, I've been kind of waiting for a film like this to really position her in the center, because she has such a wacky charisma, but not a charisma some people would ascribe to her. She has like, it's mentioned at one point that she is a Slytherin, and as a Slytherin myself, yes. And she to me is like what the best Slytherins are. We're enablers. We can be a little bossy, right? But we're also a lot of fun, and we can be fun at parties. It's true. And so I think the way that these characters are written is just so well done. It doesn't fall into a lot of the tropes that they normally would. There obviously are some things where like Molly feels a little insecure at times about the way she looks and if she can be with a guy that she has a crush on. But I thought it handled it in an authentic way, but also a way that it made sense, and it didn't treat her like some sort of punching bag or anything like that. But what do you think of these two central leads?
I think they're both great. I think this is a movie like this because it's about best friends. Like it much like Longshot, relies very strongly on the
Yeah.
chemistry of the central relationship, and I think that's for sure there. I think Caitlin Dever and Beanie Feldstein play off of each other really well. They actually seem like good friends,
Yeah.
and
Oh,
they
I should
both.
say real quick on that note. Sorry to cut you off,
Oh yeah,
but
you're fine.
they were at the screening and they talked about that. They actually lived together while they were shooting this. And
Oh.
so not that they were trying to force the chemistry, but all of the actors were like basically in the same building together. And I think that was kind of Olivia Wilde's call. I was like to try to help build that chemistry. And I think it
Mhm.
paid off really well. So sorry, go on.
Oh no, for sure. I think that's a brilliant choice because it really seems like all of the actors in the film are really comfortable around each other. Like you really feel like these are people who have spent a long time getting to know each other and can like anticipate what they're going to do and
Mm-hmm.
can play off of each other's like weird quips or dance moves, or like are annoyed by each other in what feels like a really authentic way. But yeah, I love watching the two of them together, and I think they're just really great performers, both of them.
Couldn't agree more. I'm a big fan of their chemistry. I'm a big fan of the writing involved here. And this is, it kind of reminded me in a way, again, mentioning eighth grade and the way it was edited. There are a lot of smash cuts to songs. And there is like you get the sense that Wilde really wants to come out the gate swinging. And this is what I appreciate from first time directors. Sometimes they can play it a little safe. Like they'll focus way more on the screenplay, which is great. And they'll worry a lot about how tight it is and make sure that you can follow along easily. And sometimes directors, they have a vision, but maybe they listen a little bit too much to people who are like, oh, you shouldn't do it that way because, okay, oh, look, I've been a DP on so many other films. I really like the way that Wilde collaborates because I think this is just my intuition, but I think she has a knack for knowing when to go with suggestions from other people and when to put herself into it. Because there were so many moments in this film that did feel wildly unique, no pun intended, but to her and to her sensibility as a director. And I think she brought out what I assume are some of the best parts of this screenplay that do sell the relationships here, that also sell a lot of the comedy. There's one scene in particular, my favorite shot, involving one of the main characters in a swimming pool. And it's probably my favorite shot of the year so far. And it's beauty, it's simplicity. It means so many different things at once. And it ends in a very Jaws moment that just wrecks you. And I absolutely adore it. So many scenes we could go on and on about, but let's go right into our final thoughts on this. I think we both love it. You gave it an A. So you believe it's a must see. Everyone needs to go out and see Booksmart, which comes out on May 21st, 24th, 24th.
Yes. Yeah, I think this movie needs to be huge. I think it needs to be a classic of the genre. It's the kind of movie that I think it's the kind of plot that guys get a lot that girls very rarely do,
Yeah.
and especially nerdy girls like me. So I think for that reason alone, I think it's worth seeing. But also, it's just so good. Like it deserves to be considered one of the best.
It really should. It really should. I think that's going to happen. I think this film is going to reach a status of being revisited a lot by people who grew up with it and by people our age who don't necessarily have the generational connection to it. But hey, if we can enjoy Dazed and Confused, which was way before our time, I think we can definitely get a lot out of Booksmart, and I certainly did. And I think based on what I'm seeing, okay, critics love it, 100% on Rotten Tomatoes based on 38 reviews. That's a pretty definitive consensus so far. I think, of course, it'll probably go down eventually, but I think critics are really digging this. And I think that just based on the conversation around this film, ever since it came out at South by Southwest, or when the trailer came out before that, I think people that I know who aren't normally into movies, who don't see movies like Longshot because they don't even know Longshot exists, they know what this movie is. And I think it's permeating the culture in a way that I hope translates to financial success and maybe as we were saying with like romantic comedies having a renaissance. I think comedies are in a good place right now, but I definitely want to see a really good one rise to the top in a way that we haven't quite seen in a while. Maybe I'm speaking too soon, but it's going to be distributed by United Artists, which, look, their last film was with Leica, right? They distributed Missing Link, and that is one of the biggest flops of the year. So I'm hoping that this one is an exception to what's been a little difficult for not just United Artists, but also Annapurna, which has been struggling with its indies to really rise, to kind of do what A24 manages to do, which is really get cinephiles to spread the word on these movies. But we'll see what happens. I think that Olivia Wilde has a lot of cachet. I think Will Ferrell and Adam McKay as executive producers is helping send awareness out. I'm an A- on this film. I think it's my favorite comedy of the year.
Yeah, I would agree. I'm in the same boat.
All right. It's just been a love fest on Cinemaholics this week for comedies. I think we're going to have to transition to something that maybe isn't as good. In fact, I wouldn't go as far to say that it's extremely wicked. Like, I wouldn't say this movie is shockingly evil. I would not even say that it's vile. But it is a movie called Extremely Wicked, Shockingly Evil, and Vile. I apologize to everyone who hates my jokes, who think my sense of humor is in fact extremely wicked, shockingly evil, and vile. I agree with you. It's terrible. But look, if you manage to watch this film, yeah, you might give me a pass. But this is a new biographical crime thriller about the life of serial killer Ted Bundy. But it's told through the perspective of his live-in girlfriend, Liz, who they started dating in the late 60s before a lot of the press around his serial killings, when he was sent to jail, when he escaped from jail, and all of that drama happened. He was in a long-term, but ultimately very shaky relationship with a woman named Liz and her daughter, Molly. She was a single mother. This film is directed by Joe Berlinger, screenplay is by Michael Worry, and it's actually based on a memoir by Elizabeth Liz Kendall herself. It's called The Phantom Prince: My Life with Ted Bundy. Abby, have you read this book, or do you have a lot of contextual knowledge about Ted Bundy himself?
I don't have a ton other than just kind of what's basic public record, that he was a really good-looking, charming guy, and then turned out to be a horrifying serial killer.
Yeah. Yeah, in fact, I recommend the Netflix doc. This is a Netflix film, by the way. Netflix got the rights to it out of Sundance, and I believe that's correct, which is interesting because when this was playing at Sundance, I was there, and I didn't go to the screening. Instead, I watched the documentary that Netflix came out with in January, The Confessions of a Killer, the Ted Bundy tapes. Cinemaholics listeners will remember I talked about that briefly. Very solid documentary. It's a multi-parter, and so it's broken up in some interesting ways. Definitely lays out the story in a way that I found interesting and compelling. This movie, not so much. It goes a little bit deeper on the Liz story. Obviously, she's played in this film by Lily Collins. Love Lily Collins. I think that the last film I saw her in was probably To the Bone, which I understand it wasn't for everybody, but I thought that film was kind of solid. And Zac Efron, who plays Ted Bundy, who really looks the part, to the point where Alonso Duralde from The Wrap actually predicted a few years ago that he would play this character. And so he's been rightfully broadcasting his prophetic awareness for this film. But has this one been on your radar at all, Abby? This drama about Ted Bundy, and why or why not?
It has a little bit. I'm curious about the story. I'm curious about the story from the perspective of his girlfriend, actually, since that is, I hadn't been previously aware of the book, but that is something that I would like to check out. But I think that's an interesting plot, and I'd be really curious to see what that's like, knowing that is not like a weird Lifetime movie, but like an actual thing that happened to a person.
Ooh, Lifetime movie is the word here. I think that's exactly what I was going for. Wow. So I have not read the memoir, but I definitely have a feeling that it's got to be a little bit better than this. Like, it's got to be a little bit more narratively satisfying from the Elizabeth Kendall perspective, because this movie, obviously, it is how she's dealing with everything. A lot of reaction shots. We get some development of how she's like more and more starting to realize, oh, maybe he really did all of this. And the clash between her and some of the other characters, it's interesting. And I don't hate this film or anything. I just really, really walked away from it not really getting the point of the movie itself. Why did I just watch this? What is it really trying to say about somebody in this situation? Because it sort of has a weird last minute reversal of empathy that involves the Lily Collins character sort of confessing something and then seeking a momentary catharsis with Ted Bundy. And it just doesn't quite work for me. I just don't think this is a satisfying film, especially if you're if you're very interested in Ted Bundy. I think the documentary is vastly superior, right? You're going to get a more complete picture of what he did. This movie doesn't spend a ton of time on the victims, which some people would say is a plus because, you know, you don't want to, first of all, make Ted Bundy kind of this overly charismatic and likable person, which jury is out on whether or not, no pun intended, whether or not that actually translates here. Like if you actually watch this film and walk away from it being like, oh, he was such a charming guy. Again, I think the documentary handles some of that nuance a little bit better because you can kind of watch this movie and for a lot of it be like, well, did he really do it? And I had to keep reminding myself, yeah, he did. Like the evidence is so overwhelming, but the movie, because it wants Liz to doubt it so heavily, it sort of lets that cloud hang until it can no longer. And then there's just something very strange about the note that it lands on. I'm really bummed about it because the performances here are pretty good. I think Zac Efron kills it. Now, I don't know. These are all unintended wordplay, by the way. Like, I'm so sorry about this. I feel very bad.
This is pretty bad.
This is bad. I don't mean any of it. I promise. Zac Efron does a fantastic job. Just gonna straight talk here. He really is good at capturing. There is an unsettling nature to Ted Bundy's charm. It's not just a very handsome guy who probably did something bad. It is a handsome guy, but you can kind of tell there's something behind those dead eyes. And Lily Collins, even though she doesn't get a lot of the development I personally was wanting from her character in a way that really fleshed her out, she's doing super well at showing the emotional doubt, actually making you believe that what she's trying to process memory to in a few scenes, it's chaotic, but in a very, very effective way. And then, oh my goodness, Kaya Scodelario's in this. And I haven't seen her since Pirates of the Caribbean, Dead Man Tell No Tales. And I thought, oh no, here's an actress that I really love. She was so great on Skins. Skins has been having a renaissance with a lot of its actors. Dev Patel, of course, and Nicholas Hoult, and not Taron Egerton, but the guy who kind of looks like him. There are a lot of great actors on Skins, is what I'm saying. They're fantastic, and you'll see them all over the place. Gendry, of course. Who could forget Gendry and Gilly from Game of Thrones? And I'm blanking on their actual names, so I apologize. But regardless, I thought that Kaya Scodelario is given definitely a different role than we've seen her in before, but one that's treated well. And I think that Jim Parsons and John Malkovich, I was surprised to see them. I was also very surprised to see Haley Joel Osment. I haven't seen him since probably Silicon Valley, one of the more recent seasons. But Jim Parsons plays a lawyer in here, like a Florida lawyer that I couldn't help but laugh at. I mean, it's good. He's not a bad actor, but it's just so strange to see Sheldon being this like tough talking Florida prosecutor. I had a hard time getting over that. That's a personal failing. And then John Malkovich, I thought was probably the best casting here next to Efron and Collins. Just pitch perfect, because the way that he battles wits with Zac Efron's Ted Bundy is something to watch. I think that the latter half of this movie finds some steam that the first couple actions, they don't quite have it. But I think this is one of those films that gets a little bit better as it goes along. I can't say, Abby, that I recommend it. It's a C+ for me at this point. I don't think it's anywhere near as useful a film as it could have been. And I think that even though the documentary isn't anything spectacular, it's kind of like a B- sort of documentary. It does its job and then some. So I would definitely recommend seeking that or the memoir out, or maybe just not look into it at all, because Ted Bundy is not somebody who I personally think is, I mean, it's interesting, I guess, and like a historical, it's good. I guess it's just interesting to learn more things, but there's nothing about his story that I think informs anything else. So that's where I'm at with Extremely Wicked, Shockingly Evil, and Vile. All right, let's move on to something that you've seen, but I haven't. This is a new show. It's on Netflix, right?
It is.
Okay. I've seen a lot of tweets about this. I have very little knowledge on it, so I'm going to be bugging you with questions. Abigail, Jesse, what is Tuca and Bertie?
Okay, so it's funny, first of all, that you say tweets. You're killing the puns
Oh,
today,
here
John.
we go. Mamma mia, here we go again.
So Tuca and Bertie is the new show from Lisa Hannawalt, who audiences probably best know from BoJack Horseman, where she is the production designer and one of the producers. But yeah, this is her baby. It's about two best friends, voiced by Ali Wong, who plays Bertie, and Tiffany Haddish, who plays Tuca, who live in the big city. And so it's sort of like Broad City by way of Richard Scarry, I think is a good way to describe it. So the city that they live in, they're all animals. Tuca is a toucan. Bertie is I can't remember what kind of bird she is, but she's a kind of songbird. And all of the characters around them are like anthropomorphized animals. Most of them are birds. Some of them are cats. Some of them are lizards. Some of them are monkeys. It's a very animal diverse place.
Well,
And
so the animation looks like BoJack Horseman, but is it
yes.
not like the BoJack Horseman universe?
It's very similar, and by the time you get to around the third episode, it becomes increasingly clear that that's what they're going for.
Like, are there humans though?
There start to be some human characters involved. None of them are mains, but yeah, it becomes increasingly more so the further in you get.
Got it.
But yeah, very much kind of a similar animation style, complete with like human looking bodies that are animal, and bodies are a very big important part of the show. The show does a lot with the female body. It's real into boobs.
Well, they're birds, so what else are they going to talk about?
Yeah, exactly. From a very freeing feminist perspective, I might add, not from a weird Game of Thrones kind of perspective.
Right, so it's not fetishy. Okay.
Right. No, yeah, it's very much just like kind of body positivity and female forward. A lot of the experiences that Bertie and Tuca have kind of reflect stuff that anybody might experience, especially women. Like there's an episode where dealing with like trying to get a promotion as a woman in a male dominated workplace. There's another episode about like being nervous on a first date, just like, and like trying to spice up your love life with your live-in boyfriend, like just really relatable stuff that's also just extremely funny. It's also there's a really great amount of voice talent. So Ali Wong and Tiffany Haddish are great. Stephen Yun plays Bertie's boyfriend Speckle, which is a great name. I think who else is in this? John Early plays a number of voices. Reggie Watts. And
I see on here Jermaine Fowler and Laverne Cox and Tessa Thompson as well.
Yeah, they all play occasional roles. Aquafina shows up in one episode, and Richard E. Grant also plays Bertie's boss. So like he's in a few episodes. I feel like this is the show that really gets me. Like it's weird and
it's like all your favorite
extremely
people.
funny. Yeah, and like, oh hey, here's Richard E. Grant because we heard you like that. It's like it's a lot of things. It's also got really fun attention to detail, and the rules of the world are super fun to kind of figure out as it goes along. Like the subway trains are, I think one of them is a snake and another one is like a slug. And it's stuff that you're kind of thrown in head first into this setting, and a lot of it makes sense, and then there will be something that doesn't, like a character that is like a character with a plant for a head. Like that's not a thing you expect to see, that somehow has pet turtles. So like it's very surreal as well. But it's really fun because you're never quite sure what you're going to see next.
Yeah, I'm looking at some of the episodes, and so there's 10 episodes so far. You said how many episodes have you seen? 3?
Yes, I've seen the first 3.
Okay, great. Yeah, it's fascinating because I'm seeing a lot of episodes directed by women, and almost every single one written by women. And yeah, so Lisa Hannah-Wald has written a bunch of episodes, and I see here Raphael Bob Wasberg, who is the creator of BoJack Horseman, actually worked on the first episode. So you can definitely sort of see that connection between those two shows. I love the idea of BoJack Horseman being branched out in this way. Why these puns need to end? Birds, branches. Anyway, I really like that the BoJack Horseman universe. They know that it has legs. They know that it's the kind of show that there's such good world building in it. And I haven't seen an episode yet, but I'm in. I'm totally going to watch Tuca Bertie.
Good. I'm glad you should. You should watch it as soon as you can. I know Game of Thrones is tonight, but as soon as you're done with that.
Yes, Game of Thrones is happening tonight because we are recording on Sunday, and I also need to get to She-Ra season 2, a show that neither of us have seen season 2 yet, but we're both big fans of, right?
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Okay,
season 1 is an absolute delight. So, yeah,
yes.
I can't wait to watch the new one.
I've been waiting because I know that I'm going to watch it. It's going to go by very quickly, and I want to save every moment. She-Ra is one of my favorite animated shows, so a lot of great animated shows coming out right now, so that's good.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
All right, let's finish out the show with one last review for Knock Down the House. And we both saw this one. This is a new documentary from Rachel Lears. It is about the primary political campaigns, another political film. I didn't even catch that. Surrounding mainly Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, but also Amy Vilela, Cori Bush, and Paula Jean Swearengin. These were 4 very progressive Democrats who primaried their very establishment opponents during the 2018 midterms. This film had a very quick turnaround, though, because obviously the midterms happened. The primaries were last spring. They were a year ago. And this premiered at Sundance. And I had 2 opportunities to see it. I had 2 tickets to see Knock Down the House, actually go to the events. I think the one in San Francisco, AOC actually was there, and I had to miss both. And so I'm very terrible at my job. So that's what that means. But I did finally get to see this a few days ago on Netflix. It's out now. Our staff writer, Julia Tatey, wrote a review for Knock Down the House. It's wonderful. She really dug this film and had a lot of really great things to say about it. And now we are. So, Abiel Chessie, another documentary about politics. I feel like we've gotten a lot of them lately for obvious reasons. And, of course, another political film in this episode. What did you think of Knock Down the House?
I really enjoyed it. I think it is, it's a really empowering movie. I think, I haven't read a ton about the filmmaking process, but I imagine that, that there was a lot done in post after AOC had won her primary and then the election, because it really is kind of the Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez show, with supporting roles from the 3 other women who were also running but did not win their primaries. And I think in that sense, in the areas that focus on her, I've said this a few different places, but I feel like it's kind of her dreams from my father moment. Like when she eventually runs for the presidency, like this is going to be the text that people look at to say, This is what she was like.
Which that would be a first. So
yeah. And I think she could do it. So I really appreciate that the documentary makes the effort to show these women as normal, everyday women, as just like the things that they do day in, day out, their relationships with the people around them. It's obviously, again, most impressive in the case of AOC because she's such a public figure at this moment. But just to see that her boyfriend just looks like a normal dude, or like just to watch her go and put up flyers and to knock on doors and then go to her job at a bar. And like, it's not even a thing.
We should stress this was only a year ago. And I love that. I think that it's so crazy how rapidly things happen in the political world, because now she, love her or hate her, I love her. She is a very, very influential figure among not just progressives at this point, but also a lot of centrist Democrats are also, starting to become like more, I don't know. You're starting to see her become more of a presence, I guess, in the Democrat universe. And I think that's unbelievable, because a year ago, you see in this documentary, she's at a bar. She had like a very normal job. And so it is fascinating to see that. I think a criticism that I would lobby at it, wow, why does this keep happening? That I would lobby at it, really? Is that, I did not get the sense that this was a complete film.
Mm-hmm.
I think that it has a thesis statement at the beginning. Like, okay, this is a documentary about 4 women, and it really drops that thesis statement throughout. It really is
Mm-hmm.
more about Cortez because that is the more positive story. I think that they have sort of said in the interim of this release that, well, we had a lot of footage for AOC, and it's fortunate they did apparently because they didn't know, like, and you can tell that they didn't know that she was going to become such a well-known political figure. So I do think it's fascinating to see how this footage turned out. It makes you wonder, okay, well, did they just not have that much material for these other women, or is this, like you were saying, very intentional in the way that it wanted you to focus on the person who won?
Yeah, I don't believe that. I think they probably had um they probably had a significant amount of footage for everybody and probably
Mm-hmm.
went back and chose some stuff. Which I get completely if that's how you want to market your film. But yeah, I think it does risk becoming propaganda after a certain point. Um I think the skeptic in me also is drawn to the fact that they are highlighting the work of 2 specific organizations. So it's not just the story of these women running for office. It's the story of these organizations that are helping them run. And while that's important, I feel like it also could be used as an advertisement for them. So I think it's doing some good work, but it toes the line in a few places that I feel like are less than objective.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because we should mention that the film was not made by Justice Democrats. And if it had been, and if it had gotten a significant amount of money from them, that would be worth raising. Of like, okay, well, you need to be transparent about things like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Justice Democrats, of course, was very involved in like actually, propping up these women, of course, because they were the ones who endorsed these women, and that's kind of the connection between all 4 of them. But actually, the production of this film, we should mention. So Rachel Lears, she went out of her way, like she reached out to organizations like Justice Democrats, but also Brand New Congress, and quote, to find charismatic female candidates who weren't career politicians, but had become newly galvanized to represent their communities. This, of course, was in the wake of the Donald Trump election in 2016. So that's really the impetus for this film. And we should also mention that I think a lot of the budget for this was raised through Kickstarter. So there are some things that I wish films like this would be slightly more transparent about, and you could definitely lob this at this film for maybe not being 100%. Like, you have to look this stuff up basically, and you're sort of left to wonder, like, my gosh, is this really just propaganda? Like, wait, who wants me to believe all these things, or who's trying to tell me all these things? That didn't really bog me down for the film. Not really just because my politics tend to align with a lot of these women, necessarily not everything, but, definitely important things. And definitely like the message of like government should be in the hands of the people, I think is universal, no matter what party you belong to. The idea of if somebody has a lot of power, even if they're in your party, I think that it's very healthy for a political system for people to challenge that establishment and to come up and basically be like, hey, and call them out for what they're not great at. They may not be terrible, horrible people. You're in the same party and you're on the same team, quote unquote. But at the same time, it is, like I said, so healthy for primaries to happen and for people to try. Because there's a quote in this movie of like, for every 100 people who try and lose, there's one person who will win. And that can definitely have great effects. That can have a good effect. It can have bad effects too, of course, but when good things happen, that's definitely worth celebrating. So, Knock Down the House. I like this one. Abby, what was your final grade on it though?
I think I'd give it a B minus.
Yeah, I'm between a B minus and a B, just because it really does kind of fall apart a little bit when you're like, when you find out what happens with all the women, and you're like, well, I want to feel something, but I don't know them enough. And I know so much AOC, but I will give this movie credit when AOC has her moment of like, it's no longer this like pipe dream. That really hit me. Like, I really enjoyed that. So I'm going to bump it right on the very, very low B for me, very close to a B minus. But I mean, if a film can make me cry, it's got to get something. It's got to get a couple points for that. So
fair enough.
Yeah. And I will say, one of my comments too, because like I said, so Julia Tatey wrote the review for this, and so she saw it before I did. And when I saw it, I followed up with her and I was like, I think the exact thing I said to her was like, either make an AOC movie or don't. Like, just do that. And I do actually wonder, like, would this been a little bit stronger if it had narrowed the focus? Or would it be weaker because it didn't have enough other, if it didn't have the stakes of these other women running? So that's something that I'm kind of conflicted about. Do you have a stance or?
I think that's a good question to ask. I don't know that I definitively come down one way or the other myself. I do think that having those stakes in there does help the movie. But now that we actually know the outcome, I feel like it would have been just as fine if you'd made a movie only about her.
Absolutely. All right, so that's about a B- B average for us. A lot of great movies, though, on the show this week. Thank you so much again, Abby, for coming on and filling in. Always fun to talk with you on the show and pick your brain about romantic comedies, and very political things. I think there was a nice little through line for all of these films this week.
There was. It was a great bookend. I appreciated that.
All right, next week, we are going to be talking about Detective Pikachu, which you, I believe, are watching tomorrow, correct?
Yes, I'm seeing it tomorrow night, and I am very, very excited. This was, if you'd asked me at the end of last year or beginning of this year, if it was on my most anticipated list, I would have said it ironically, but now, that's out the window. I am genuinely excited for this movie.
I like how you honestly were like, oh, I wouldn't have said, no, you would have said it, but it would have been ironic. That's great. If you want to follow along with Abby's thoughts on that film and all of her stuff in general, please follow her on Twitter. The link to that is in the show notes. But Abby, what is your Twitter handle?
It's at Abby Olcese. That's ABBYOLCESE.
Awesome. And of course, yes, the link to her Twitter is, of course, in the show notes. We might also be talking about Tolkien. There's also Palms, The Hustle, a lot of other films coming out next week to challenge Endgame, which, again, I mean, this film is looking like it's going to become the highest grossing film of all time. We'll perhaps have an update on that next week. So for now, don't forget to leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or Stitcher, anywhere else where you can leave us a review and support the show that way. And if you want to hang out with us on Facebook, Twitter, send us an email, all that stuff, all the links to our social media and our email are in the show notes. And with that, we'll see you again next week from the Internet, California. I'm John Agroni.
From the Internet, Kansas City, I'm Abby Olcese.
See you next time.